Has this ever happened to you? You were at your best friend's house and you were asked if you would like to watch Friends or Modern Family. Both sitcoms are appealing to you. However, Friends is your favorite, so you opt to choose it. If you have, or have been in any situation similar to this, chances are you have made a decision before. In fact, I'm sure we've all made decisions before, some of which we regret and some of which we are proud of. Politicians also make the same decisions, but on a larger scale. Instead of pondering what funny sitcom to watch with their friends, they evaluate whether or not they should go to war with another country. Cambridge Dictionary defines politics as the activities of the government, members of lawmaking organizations, and people who try to influence the way the country is governed. With these activities come heavy decision-making. May it be from deciding how to allocate funds in a certain department or how to campaign for the presidential elections. These decisions are what ultimately makes or breaks our country. This is why lawmakers and politicians have their own political advisors. This is because their decisions have heavy weight, and the lives of the citizens are dependent on these choices. Decisions in the political sphere are heavily evaluated through hearings, which are a long process. Now we can ask ourselves, is there any way to objectively evaluate these decisions? This is where game theory comes into play. Game theory is defined as the study of strategic decision-making where situations are called games and the participants are called players. One may think that politics isn't a game, but game theory actually covers things outside of playful games like business and economics, war, and of course, politics. Game theory aims to find the Nash equilibrium, strategies, and so on, all of which will be discussed later on in the video. First, let's define the key concepts that we will use, namely payoffs, players, moves, and strategies. These elements can be analyzed in normal form, which looks like this, or extensive form, which can look like this. To illustrate these elements, we will be looking at it in normal form. The payoff is the number value that you get when choosing a certain move, which is 1, 0, so on. The players are the participants of the game. In this example, it is Julie and Vin. The moves are the actions that you will choose to make. So in this example, Julie and Vin can either choose to support or condemn as a move. Lastly, the strategy. This is defined as the sequence of moves a player can make. Now that we have defined key concepts, we can now move on to relating game theory and politics. There are many different kinds of games, namely simultaneous and sequential, randomness, perfect and imperfect information games, and so on. We can relate politics to all these kinds of games, but some descriptions fit better than others. Simon Sinek actually brings an interesting description about finite and infinite games in relation to wars.
In game theory, there are two types of games. There are finite games and there are infinite games. A finite game is defined as known players, fixed rules, and agreed upon objective. Baseball, right? An infinite game is defined as known and unknown players. The rules are changeable, and the objective is to perpetuate the game. When you pit a finite player versus a finite player, the system is stable. Baseball is stable. So is conventional war, for that matter. When you pit an infinite player versus an infinite player, the system is also stable. The Cold War was stable. And that's because in an infinite game, there are no winners and losers. We cannot lose the game. And so we work to keep the game in play.
He said in the video that it would be hard for a finite player to play with an infinite player because they both have starkly different objectives. One is to win the game and the other is to continue it. In the case of the Cold War, the table will look like this. The row player is the Soviet Union, so we will be looking at the first value of each of the squares. And the Americans are the column players, which is the second value in each box. If the Soviet Union attacks and the Americans don't retaliate, it gives the Soviet Union a value of 2 because they would win, and a negative 2 for the Americans because they would lose and experience destruction. If the roles were reversed, then so would their values. It gives the Americans a value of 2 because they would win, and a negative 2 for the Soviet Union because they would lose and experience destruction as well, same as the Americans in the other square. Then if both players don't attack, it would leave a value of 0 for both players. There would be nothing happening and life would go on. But one interesting value is the negative infinity for both players. Since the Cold War was seen as an infinite game for both players, it would be seen as a negative infinite because both countries would cause destruction upon each other infinitely and lose resources. In the end, the Soviet Union decided that it did not want to participate in the game anymore and fell off. However, this does not mean that America won. An infinite game is when the other player lacks the resources to continue. The game goes on until there are no more players that are willing to participate in it anymore. Even if the Cold War had ended, the game of ideologies, economies, and liberties still continue. This is why it's important in politics to recognize whether the situation is infinite or a finite game. Next, I'll be defining the Maximin solution. The Maximin solution was proposed by John von Neumann, a Hungarian-American mathematician, physicist, computer scientist, engineer, and polymath. He defines the Maximin solution as picking a strategy that gives you the maximum possible payoff, even if the other player knows the move you are about to make. For this, I'll be analyzing how former US President Donald Trump and current US President Joseph Biden strategized the 2020 presidential elections by winning the swing states. In America, some states are more Democratic than others, like New York and California, and some states are more Republican than others, like Alaska or Kentucky. But there is something called the swing states, or purple states, that are neither Democratic or Republican completely. In the 2016 elections, Donald Trump actually won by winning the swing states and campaigning there more. In the 2020 elections, he did the same thing, but so did Biden. For this example, I'll be discussing the Maximin solution, where the situation is which swing state to win over to get more electoral votes. I will be representing the swing states of Georgia and Michigan, since both yield 16 electoral votes. We should note that although Georgia and Michigan are swing states, Georgia is more likely to vote red and Michigan is more likely to vote blue, as seen in this table. Here, we have analyzed the payoffs for each move using historical accounts and politics as reference. To analyze the Maximin solution, we must look at the lowest possible payoff for each move and for each player. For Trump, his minimum values are -2 for Georgia, -3 for Michigan, -3 for both, and -5 for neither. The Maximin strategy for Trump is move Georgia with payoff -2. For Biden, his minimum values are -3 for Georgia, -2 for Michigan, -3 for both, and -5 for neither. The Maximin strategy for Biden is move Michigan with payoff -2. Next is the dominant strategy. This is defined as a strategy that dominates all other strategies, or in other words, all the payoffs are greater than all the other moves in the matrix. It is a strong dominant strategy when it dominates all other strategies. If both players have strongly dominated strategies, there will be a dominant strategy equilibrium. For this example, I will be using the topic of the Battle of Okehazama in 1560. The Battle of Okehazama was a war over territories, since at the time, more territory meant more power. The battle was between clans who had samurai, and they had fought over the control of Japan. To do this, they had to seize Kyoto, which at the time was the imperial capital of Japan. So this is now political. However, to get to Kyoto, Oda Nobunaga, a local warlord, had to fight Imagawa Yoshimoto and Matsudaira Motoyasu's clans since the two had an alliance. Imagawa and Matsudaira lived near Kyoto, and they had to be defeated in order to make it to the imperial capital. This proved to be a challenge because Nobunaga had 2,500 samurai, while Imagawa and Matsudaira had 25,000. They were stacked 10 to 1. We will analyze Oda Nobunaga's strategy and see which one is dominant. Once again, through historical means, we have come up with a payoff for all clans and all choices. As we can see here, the battle clan move for Nobunaga dominates the don't battle clan move. If we look at the payoffs, 1 is greater than -1 and 3 is greater than 0. This is his dominant strategy. However, for Imagawa and Matsudaira, 2 is greater than -1, but 0 is not greater than 0, so there is no dominant strategy for Imagawa and Matsudaira. Since both players do not have dominant strategies, there is no dominant strategy equilibrium for this game. Now we can discuss the Nash equilibrium. This was coined by John Forbes Nash Jr., and he defined it as a list of strategies with one strategy per player, such that each strategy is the best response to other strategies on that list. Neither player can reach a better payoff than the Nash equilibrium. For this concept, I'll be using the trade with China and Venezuela. For my reference, I'll be using a paper titled A Critical Look at Chinese Debt Trap Diplomacy, The Rise of a Meme. In the paper, it discusses the many incidents of China's Belt and Road Initiative, which aims to start trade in various parts of the world through a specific route in order to export excess capital and create new opportunities with countries. However, many countries, many Westerners, aim to demonize this opportunity as a debt trap, hence the debt trap meme. They cite several disastrous trades between China and other countries, mainly Sri Lanka, Djibouti, and Venezuela. Today I'll be analyzing Venezuela's case with China. Venezuela was dependent on China and Japan for oil trades. However, when the Americans imposed sanctions on Venezuela and their national bank, they had issues paying China back since they had reached an all-time low in their economy in 16 years. Instead, China opted to be paid in oil instead of cash and to restructure repayment terms. Let us analyze these decisions in normal form. For the values, if Venezuela and China both choose to continue the deal, then Venezuela will have a chance to jumpstart their economy and China will have a chance to get paid back. So the payoff will be 2-1. If China chooses to continue the deal and Venezuela chooses to terminate the deal, Venezuela would lose revenue and China would lose the money it lent, with payoffs -2 and -2. But the deal being terminated would not be as great for China as it is for Venezuela because their economy is not on the brink of collapse. This is why if China terminates the deal while Venezuela would continue the deal, the payoffs would be -3, -1, since Venezuela could perhaps renegotiate the terms. Then if both countries choose to terminate the deal, China would lose money, but Venezuela would not only lose money, economic opportunity, but also a stable partnership with another country with a payoff of -4 and -1. Now we need to analyze the payoffs for the Nash equilibrium. This is going to be different because we will switch how we see the table. If before we will look at the role player horizontally, we will now look at the role player vertically because we will base the decisions on the other player's choice. For example, let's say that China chooses to continue the deal. Then we would evaluate the payoffs for Venezuela, which is 2 and -2. 2 is greater than -2, so we choose this. Next, we evaluate if China chooses to terminate the deal. Venezuela's payoffs will be -3 and -4. -3 is greater than -4, so we choose this. Now we look at it if Venezuela would like to continue the deal. China's payoffs would be 1 and -1. 1 is greater than -1, so we choose this. Lastly, if Venezuela chooses to terminate the deal, China's payoffs would be -2 and -1. -1 is greater, so this is what we choose. As you can see now, continue to deal's moves payoffs are both highlighted. This is its Nash equilibrium.
When we examine how politicians weigh decisions through game theory, we can better understand the decision-making process and how they weigh advantages and disadvantages. In the end, politics is inevitable. The better we can make sense of this, the better we can make sense of our current reality.